Hello, everyone. My name is Martha Novak, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. We are almost concluding our work, our series that we've had on relationships. Certainly, if we've not covered anything, I think we've covered almost everything or will by the end. Certainly write me. My website is marthanovak.com, and I'd love to hear from you. So we're talking about all aspects of relationship and what makes good ones, what makes bad ones, what to watch out for before, during, and after, what motivates people to do what they do. We're going to talk a lot about that today because we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects ever since I found this man's book a couple of years ago. As a matter of fact, I taught several of his ideas, and I think they're very good. A guy named Bill Eddy. He's a lawyer, and he's quite the expert in high conflict personalities, which often find themselves needing a lawyer, as a matter of fact. So we're going to talk about these people specifically in terms of relationships today. Well, hello, Kat, and hello, Sarah. Oh, aren't you darling? Thank you, Sarah. She said she looked forward to listening to us on Sunday mornings. I can't thank you enough. And it's just marvelous to hear from you because, doing what you do on the radio, you're kind of sitting here unless people call in or communicate with you. You're just kind of sending your voice out into the void, sending some of these ideas out. So it's wonderful to know that you listen and that you look forward to it. Thank you so much, dear heart. I appreciate it. We have quite the community here, I think, and I'm really proud of it and proud of all of you as we try to make our worlds and the world around us better. So thank you very much, darling. Let's do a prayer, put us all on the same page, and we're going to go launch in to Bill Eddy's article. Here we are. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much. We open ourselves now to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment. All this, dear God, is within us. We know it, and we have things in the way sometimes to keep us from hearing what we need to hear. We talk about those things, and we will talk about them even more. But, dear God, thank you so much for opening us to now get past all this stuff, that we may live more and more frequently in our highest selves, our love-based self, that we may go out into the world with what we have and what we know, and share it or just know it. Sometimes that's enough. We thank you so much, dear God, for all of this, and we say this prayer in your name, in the name of everybody that's listening to the show, our love-centered guides and friends, and so it is. Amen. Okay, guys, let's launch in. I first found Bill Eddy a couple of years ago. He wrote a book that I like very much, although I don't like the title, I've got to tell you. 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life is the name of the book. He is a lawyer, a therapist, a mediator, and the training director of the High Conflict Institute in San Diego. Okay. Oh, good morning. I'm so glad to see you, Sheila. Oh, thank you very much. You all are all so kind. So, I found this book, 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life. Here's my little pickiness. The name of the book, I think it's a little sensational. I don't believe that anybody can ruin your life. There you are. I just do not. I'm sure he has a different perspective being a lawyer, but as someone who has helped people start over again a lot in my life, there's nothing that is going to stop you. Certainly, we can lose money, but we're wiser for it if we are in a bad relationship. We literally must know that we can go on. If you don't know that, I do urge you to get some help so that you will know that, because entering into any relationship is better when you know, I create my life. I create it. There you go. Okay. So, what Bill Eddy says, though, is perfectly marvelous. So let me launch into his article for you. And this, by the way, was online. And the name of the article that he wrote is 4 Warning Signs of a High Conflict Partner. We're going to tell you what that is and everything. Okay. High conflict people tend to have 4 primary characteristics. This is directly from his book, but he's certainly talking about relationships now instead of in business. But it's the same thing. All right. The characteristics are, number 1, preoccupation with blaming others. Preoccupation with blaming others. Number 2, all or nothing thinking and solutions. Number 3, unmanaged or intense emotions. And number 4, extreme behaviors and or threats. The high conflict person has an enduring pattern of interpersonal behavior. Now, some of you all are not in relationships, some of you are. Certainly, if you're not in relationship, keep your eyes open for these behaviors. If you're already in relationship and you recognize that you are married to a high conflict partner, you yourself have to get in a different mind space to know what to say and what to do with this. His book goes into great detail, and I think it's very good detail. We're going to hit on a little bit of it today, okay? All right. Certain personality disorders, he says, are prone to high conflict behavior, and they are these: narcissistic, borderline, antisocial, and histrionic, and paranoid. All right, just a brief bit on these things. Narcissistic, I think we all know what narcissism is. By the way, I think everybody is a narcissist until they're not. You know, children are very narcissistic simply by the nature of them being children. Everything is seen from their perspective. It's all about them, you see. That's how a lot of issues were formed. The problem is that we sometimes don't age out of it. And there are 3 kinds of narcissism. There's the exhibitionist narcissist, which is the kind of P.T. Barnum, right, type. The second narcissist is a closet narcissist. That is someone who appears to be not a narcissist, but is. And 3 is the toxic narcissist. May you never meet that person. May I never meet that person. That's someone who, the toxic narcissist usually goes along with, say, a murderer or a serial killer or something like that. They're very narcissistic. I just finished watching whatever that thing is, the latest serial killer thing. I always watch these things because I want to know more about these personalities and what formed them. I don't have much use for these shows that don't go into the psychological reasons that people do what they do, but I certainly want to hear what psychology created certain people. All right. And there was one, now what was this killer's name? I can't remember. It's on Netflix right now. What was it? Well, it seems, that's how important it was. But he killed quite a lot of people. And what was so remarkable about him is he didn't have a modus operandi. He killed everybody, seemingly very randomly. And if you watch for the narcissism, you will certainly see it. That's toxic narcissism. Borderline. Borderline is a personality disorder that is very difficult to manage. In fact, there is no drug for borderline personality. They can be helped if they seek help at all, usually through cognitive therapy. Borderlines are fear abandonment in the worst way, but they've got a lot of anger. The things they do are very erratic. Now, I encourage you, because we all need to know more, to get on the internet and look up some of these, or to buy a DSM and read about these things. Antisocial, I think most people know what that is. That doesn't mean a serial killer. That means somebody who literally doesn't have a lot of remorse. We have a lot of antisocial people walking around among us. Sometimes they're very fine doctors. This is somebody who doesn't get involved emotionally. This is someone who's a little cold and distant, but who, goes into the information, handles information real well. Antisocial people are in all walks of life. Okay? They just are people that don't feel as much as other people. There's a chemical compound. They've done some research. Now, this was on not just antisocials. This was done on psychopaths, as I recall. And psychopaths and antisocial are not the same thing, guys. But a study was done on them. I think I read about this years ago in a book called The Mask of Sanity, about these people that are walking around among us. And one of the things that they said was that they had done an experiment firing a pistol into the air behind someone who had these personality disorders, and they didn't jump, they didn't flinch when the gun went off, even if and everybody knew there was a gun that was going off behind them. And of course, with the retort, I would be, whoa, even if I knew it was coming. But they had a lower chemical makeup that didn't have them startle, certainly, as much as a normal person would. I thought that was very interesting. And nevertheless, when I'm saying antisocial and psychopathic are different personalities, sometimes they could be the same thing. All right. Histrionic. We've talked about histrionic before because it's one of my the things I go after in my work. Histrionic is someone who is overly dramatic about everything. Everything's a drama. Everything's the end of the world. Well, it's just not. It's not the end of the world, and it's not a drama. It just is a thing. Okay, and then the next characteristic is paranoid. You all know what paranoid is. I think most people know what that is. Okay, so Bill Eddy goes on to say, and this is a really important part I want you all to understand. Many people, perhaps he says even half the people with these disorders, do not have a high conflict personality pattern because they're not preoccupied with blaming other specific people. He calls these other specific people that are blamed in the high conflict personality targets of blame. These are personality disorders that just cannot see their own part in problems they have, and therefore they don't try to change them. That's what he says about this. But having these personality disorders does not mean that somebody has high conflict personality. This is something else entirely. High conflict patterns are usually hidden, by the way, at the beginning of a relationship or a partnership in any kind of intimate or business sense or friendship. Most people are surprised when it turns out that their spouse, their business partner, or other people close to them have a high conflict personality. Suddenly, you become the target of blame. Everything is all your fault. Suddenly, you become the most vilified person in the world. And it can be quite silly, something that you were not anywhere around for them to say you did it. Okay? So everything is all your fault. The partner's solutions may escalate into extremes, from refusing to talk about important issues to spreading rumors, on right up to breaking things or exhibiting violence. I had a flash cross my mind of a dear client that I had who was divorcing a man who had some of these personality disorders. He was definitely high conflict. She was very flattered. She was getting older when she met him, and she wanted to have a baby before it was too late. And he came on really strong. In retrospect, she realized how strong he was coming on was part of the personality disorders that he carried and his high conflict personality. But she didn't know it at the time. She just was enormously flattered. She'd never have had anybody so focused on her. But guess what she became? Because he was so focused on her, she became the target of blame. She indeed had that baby. She indeed got out of the relationship and divorced him, but he made it very, very difficult, threatening to expose whatever he knew about her, which wasn't much, and put it all over the internet, tell the lawyers, cause a big scandal. Guys, I do want to say with all my heart, know the people that you get involved with. Know them. Yes, you can't see this in the beginning. Perhaps not. Perhaps you could. Depends on how sensitive you've developed yourself, right? But for God's sake, that's what dating is for. And we make a mistake by hopping into bed with somebody when we don't know who they are. We haven't seen them over a period of time, because let me tell you, this does reveal itself. And in fact, a lot of things reveal themselves right away. If you go out to dinner with someone who does nothing but talk about themselves and never asks about you, you don't think that's a warning sign? It is. Okay. While there are ways to manage high conflict personalities when they're not too severe, that's real important. A lot of people don't want to get involved with a relationship like this to begin with if they see it early. Point is to see it early, right? If you recognize yourself in any of these patterns that we're going to be talking about, it's never too late to change. The problem is a lot of these personality disorders, psychology calls them personality disorders. You know, I don't like that word. And I'll tell you why, because as I am working with this and unwinding these things in my way, because I do energy work, what I find is they're more ordered than normal. So when we talk about something being a disorder, that just doesn't work for me, because they're more ordered than normal. What I do prefer to think of them as is defenses. They are very well-mounted and sophisticated defenses because these people have been so hurt. Okay. Certainly, if you have these things, you need to find a good non-judgmental therapist that can help you. Because these things are so entrenched and so developed, a lot of people feel like there is no help, and a lot of other people feel like they don't want any because it seems to be working for them on some level. It is you all that listen to a show like this that makes me feel a bit like I'm preaching to the choir, because you all really already know this. And you're just finding your way back to owning it on a deeper level. You know these things about the world. You are working on many of these things because you're not high conflict personalities, right? Good. So let's talk about the 4 what he calls warning signs of a high conflict partner. And we're going to talk about them in more detail. So number 1, preoccupation with blaming others. He says you're going to see this personality trait in the way the person that you're observing is speaking to others. Does he say, or she say, by the way, my last divorce was all her fault? Does he say, or she say, my last business partner totally destroyed the business, ran it into the ground? Does he or she say, my neighbor ruins everything? One of these statements once in a while may be true, but it's worth checking out the situation because these also can be warning signs. Is there a pattern of speaking this way? Did one person say all of the statements? If so, that is very concerning, because in any relationship, usually there are 2 people that contribute to a problem or more, and there are 2 people that contribute or more to solutions, right? This is part of human nature. But if your partner is blaming other people a lot, you will also find that they're not taking the responsibility they should. It can come out quite ridiculous, Something goes wrong with the car. It's not your car. You haven't driven it for 2 months, but it's all your fault that it broke. All your fault. This isn't rational sometimes, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? All right. So this is someone, I want to say that, in my humble opinion, and it is humble about this, I think this person that has these characteristics, a high conflict person, is particularly shame-based. Do you know what I mean by that? I'm going to do a course on shame in probably next week or the following week. This is someone that really is very, very ashamed of what we don't know. It could be real, it could not be real. But shame is at a real core place. That's one of the reasons that a lot of high conflict people don't seek help. They actually eschew any kind of psychology or anything that could help them because they conceive it as a threat. They perceive it as a threat. I want to say to you, if you notice this person blaming, it's naive for you to think that you're not going to be the target of that once you get closer. You will absolutely be the target for that. And that really, no matter what kind of self-esteem you go in to a relationship having, being the target of blame every single day for something, several times a day sometimes, is going to wear you down. Certainly, I believe in talking to an individual and saying, this does not make me feel good. Look at what you're doing. First of all, they're not taking responsibility for themselves and their own actions, and that they create things. Okay? That's really important. If they continue not to do that, even though you've said, please, let's not, perform this way with each other, I think you need to look at that relationship, because if somebody doesn't want to change, somebody has to, for the health and well-being of the individual that's being blamed. So you might want to look at getting out, or going to work, or doing something so that you are not there. I hate to say that. My whole work is always trying to keep families together, But when is enough enough? Number 2 characteristic is all or nothing thinking or solutions. He goes on to say that high conflict people think in all or nothing terms. They tend to see people as all good and all bad. And this very much, by the way, is a characteristic of borderline personality. Somebody, they just put them on a pedestal, but the next day if they do something that they misunderstand or they don't like, they're at the bottom of a dirty bird cage, okay? They can turn on them real fast. But the high conflict person in general sees everything as all good or all bad. They can often escalate disagreements into much larger judgments of the relationship whole. Well, then let's just get divorced. All right, I'll just go back to California. That's ridiculous. If you won't agree, by the way, on whatever the minor issue is, then they're ready to just throw everything away. Let's just dissolve this partnership. You're the worst partner I've ever had. I totally believe everything anybody has ever said about you that's bad. Other all or nothing examples, he goes on to say, include repeatedly canceling or not showing up for appointments, claiming credit for the work of others, denying responsibility for spending money unreasonably, or blatant lying. Rather than excuse such extremes, he is recommending that you take them seriously and look at the overall patterns of behavior. And he said that we should all watch out for the words that are designed to hook you in. For example, I feel totally unsupported by you. My childhood was the worst ever. You need to give me a break. Of course, in rare situations, these statements may be true, but they're also warning signs. They're just some things we do as human beings that there are no excuses for, We may have reasons for them, but here is the bottom line. Help is all around. Make that decision to get help. You see? That's always on the table for everybody. Number 3. Unmanaged or intense emotions. This is often where the biggest surprise comes. The partner suddenly blasts you with intense rage over something minor or a non-existent problem. Maybe tasks before people that they think is so important, right? People are often frozen in fear or doubt after being the target of such rage. Guys, I think that everybody is a bit shame-based. I think I might have mentioned this to you. If not, I mentioned it to the class. I mean, for example, who didn't go out in the yard when they were a kid and get filthy dirty? I certainly did. So your mom catches you in the yard and you're so proud of yourself because you're discovering new things and you're playing with plants and you're digging them up and you're putting them back and you're feel real grown up out there. You're getting dirty. So what, right? That's what didn't even occur to you. You're discovering things. And yet your mom comes out and she says, oh, you're such a bad child. Look how dirty you are. Oh, you're causing me so much more work. Oh my God, what in the world were you thinking? And all of a sudden, we're shamed. That's just part of parenting, guys. That's just part of parenting. Nevertheless, there isn't anybody that grows up without shame. Now, the reason I'm saying that, I'm stepping away from his article for a minute to say this to you, is you better work on that. Because to be the target of blame and to go into that willingly means there is something that needs to be fixed in you. I mean, you don't have to like it to go into it willingly, nevertheless. You know, if you don't immediately say, oh, stepped over the line, that's not appropriate. There is something shame-based in you that you must address before you get into a partnership. I think before you get into any partnership. Because two things are operative when someone's blaming you. There is a blamer and there is a blamee. And you better know what you did or did not do and what's appropriate or what is not, because otherwise you're going to lose yourself. And I don't want you to lose yourself. And that's why I'm saying what I'm saying to you. I hope you understand this. If you have any questions about this, by all means, write me on Facebook Live or something, because I need for you to understand this. You need not to take something like that. Okay. He goes on to say, that people are often frozen in fear or doubt after being the target of such rage. He said, you may question yourself. You may say, did I really do something so bad? Is there something seriously wrong with me? Do you understand those questions come out of something that was present before you got into this relationship with this person? They're triggering that. I'd like to see those things fixed in you before you ever are in a relationship, because it becomes then very clear. Excuse me, you are putting words into my mouth and you're assigning an intention to me that wasn't there. Here's where I was coming from. Now, you get on that side of the line, because you're in my territory now and you don't tell me what to think and what to feel. You've got to be able to speak like that. You see? It's called having boundaries. It's called knowing what you did and what you didn't do. Now, let me tell you, if I did something, I am the first one that wants to apologize to you. But if you are blaming me for something that I did not do, you bet I'm going to speak up. It's inappropriate blame. And I think a lot of our emotionally maturing is to know what's appropriate and what isn't. If you've done something that's appropriate, to apologize and to take your share of blame for whatever it was you did. All right? If not, if you didn't do anything and this is just their rage and you're the target of blame, then you need to realize that. Okay. the questions that I just put forth in his article, by the way, Bill Eddio's article, is there something seriously wrong with me? Did I do something bad? With the questions. These are common questions people ask themselves around a high conflict person. And it's a sign of healthy self-reflection. However, if the person's emotions repeatedly do not fit their circumstances, if they are upset over something minor over and over and over and over again, you've got to realize that's a warning sign that they are unable to manage their emotions. You've got to realize that a lot of people have never learned to work through problems. They've never learned it. And it's extremely important to work through problems with somebody that you care about. I say, whenever I'm couples counseling, that we all have three choices. We can sweep it under the rug and not look at it. Not a great idea. You've heard about that big pile in 10 or 20 years. It's going to be there and nothing's going to have a name on it. And it's in the room. Number two, you can just go on and say, you're mad as hell and never resolve it. These are usually the people that said, oh, you always do this. Well, here you did it 10 years ago, and you did it 8 years ago, and you did it today, and it's what you always do. Okay. And the third thing is to divorce, or there's a fourth solution, and that is that you learn to work through things. You learn to handle your emotions so that you can become rational and work through things. Okay. With high conflict people, borderline narcissistic and histrionic specifically, these people demonstrate very intense and unmanaged emotions. Sometimes with high conflict people, you don't even see unmanaged or intense emotions. For example, high conflict people with antisocial personality disorders or paranoid personality disorders may keep their emotions under tight control most of the time. In reality, their hidden emotions may be driving their extreme behaviors. Very important to realize. You've got overt demonstrations of emotion. You've got covert demonstrations of emotion. But it all comes out eventually in behavior. You see? Okay. Number 4 is extreme behaviors or threats. Sometimes there's a growing pattern of extreme behavior as you get to know someone. Other times they've engaged in some sort of extreme behavior that most people wouldn't do. While they may have a credible excuse, Bill Eddy says, like, I was tired, or what was another one? I was stressed. You have to ask yourself if you would ever do that behavior, even if you were tired or in distress. High conflict people are often used to quickly, by the way, coming up with excuses for their extreme behavior. I have seen this in my work. They are so good at saying, you've misread me, and coming up with what's going on, and it's all bull. You see, when you're a sensitive, and if you're interested in this work, yes, you are. You've got to understand that when the bottom line, when somebody tells the truth of the bottom line, you feel it. I can feel it. There we are. There is this energy of release there when someone tells the truth. I don't have much patience for people that aren't telling the truth, unless they're really trying to drill down. But I'm going to tell you that with these personality disorders, they can manipulate you. They'll try. But frequent excuses like that are another warning sign. Threats of extreme behavior can be another warning sign, Bill Eddy says. You'll never see your kids again if you divorce me. Or I'll go and kill myself before I'll let you break up with me. Or I'll ruin your reputation. I'll just call everybody you know and tell them how terrible you are. I'm going to go to the press and the TV stations and tell them all about you and everything that I know. By the way, he says that those threats do need to be taken seriously. They're not part of any kind of normal relationship. Nobody who has loved you would ever do those things. I'm going to tell you now. That's high conflict personality stuff. And that's not any part of a normal relationship. He goes on to say, do some research and self-reflection, do some dating, watch them, see how they relate to other people before you get involved. And by the way, if you'd like to read more about this, he's written a very good book. I mentioned earlier, I need to mention it again, 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life, which, again, I have a little problem with the title, but nobody asked me. All right, kids, I'd like to now, we just said you need to watch yourself before you commit. Why don't we talk about commitment and commitment anxiety? Because there are people that have commitment anxiety. You may be one of those people, and we need to go into that next, I think. I love a good cup of tea in the morning. So I found an article, Signs Your Significant Other Suffers from Commitment Anxiety. And this is by Maria Scinto, Scinto. She begins the article by saying a lot of people, joke about commitment anxiety, but it's certainly no laughing matter when you are in relationship with somebody that has this. This is someone who has one eye on the horizon and one foot out the door at all time. And if you're just having fun and casually dating, that doesn't matter at all. But when you are in love with somebody, you want a mature, emotionally mature, long-lasting relationship. It is a real problem. So let's talk about it in detail. I wonder if in commitment anxiety, if that isn't in part shame-based as well. So I think shame is something we're going to have to talk about eventually, next week or the following week. While a person with commitment anxiety might actually want to have a long-term arrangement with you, it is a proposition that is more in fantasy for them. They're thinking, I want to do this someday. I'd like to do this with someone. If they feel that way, the prospects of this relationship working are just not that great. The commitment phobe's overwhelming anxiety, and I think Psych Central quoted this, overwhelming anxiety prevents them from staying in any relationship for too long. What's more, if you press for a commitment, they are far more likely to leave the relationship than make the commitment. Or they may initially agree to commitment and then back down a few days or weeks later because of their overwhelming anxiety and fears about this. So it's best to spot any sign of commitment anxiety as soon as possible. And then you can decide to stay or to go. But what I hope you won't decide is to wait in fantasy. Problem with fantasy in a situation like this, there's a big problem with fantasy all over the place, in my opinion, but we've talked about that. Fantasy doesn't have any end. You realize that, right? There is no, I'm going to see how this goes for 3 months, 6 months. Fantasy, just, you're always hoping. It's something that if you are prone to fantasy, we've done since childhood. Most people are prone to fantasy, men and women in some way. But boy, is it not a good idea. So that's something else I'd love for you all to work on ahead of time before you get into partnership with somebody. And that is the acceptance of reality, the acceptance of what is. Gosh, that's a starting place to know a lot of things, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly to know yourself well and how creative you are to negotiate the what is. But it's also the starting place, if you believe as I do, to know God, because God's all you are. It starts with the acceptance of what is. So, I think there were 3 characteristics that Maria Scinto put on the table here. And this is of the commitment phobe. So let's go into these characteristics. 1, a person who has commitment anxiety sometimes, a lot of times, might have a long list of exes. One of the things that I think she brings up that's important to realize is any adult who has a long string of short-term relationships in the past is probably not going to be that likely to commit to a long-term relationship in the present. Just the facts. They don't know how to do it, you see. Do understand that a commitment phobe has never learned to work through problems. They just run away. This is not someone that you can say, here's a problem, let's fix this. What could we do as a solution right now, present time, to fix this? Right? Number 2. Your conversations with a commitment phobe tend toward the casual and the shallow. To be serious in a relationship and certainly to grow through the years, it requires soul bearing. Soul bearing. You need to strip away the personality and stand there as just a soul, willing to be ordinary, willing to say, here I am, just as who I am. If you were the one doing that, however, it's a major red flag when the other person is not. Emotional vulnerability is what helps people become closer to each other through the years. Do you understand that? That and being able to say, oh, there's a problem, so here's an argument that we're having. And I'm on my side, and I'm right, and you're on your side, and you're right. Guys, being right has destroyed more relationships than just about anything I can think of. You've got to be willing to drop that and just come to the middle and find honesty and solutions that are beyond either one of you all on those poles of right and wrong. But someone who has a hard time with commitment is going to have a very hard time opening up. They may not open up at all, or they may open up a little bit. By the way, if you're in fantasy, you know what you're going to do? Oh, he said this. Maybe there's hope. Every few months, I have a client that does this, by the way. A little teeny tiny piece from her, by the way, high conflict husband. Yes. Okay. You can imagine what we're working on right now, which is dropping the fantasy, right? Living in reality. Asking yourself if that's enough. I just think it's so wonderful when partners can talk about anything and have significant conversations without feeling threatened. I know that one of my clients bemoaned the fact that he was married to a high conflict person, by the way, woman, and she could not just have a conversation. He'd mentioned something that he was reading in the paper, and instead of saying, you know what, I think this, and well, I think this, and sharing thoughts, she didn't want to hear what he thought. It was all a threat if everybody didn't think exactly as she did. She had to be right. She wanted validation. So every conversation turned into a wrestling match. Is that pleasant? No. You want to be able to talk to your lovely partner about everything. And you all need to agree to disagree sometimes. You see? It's very hard to do with someone who is high conflict, though. I'm going to tell you. They only want you to validate them. Why? Probably shame, but we can look at all the causes sometime. You want to have significant conversations. You're going to miss it if you don't have that. You're going to have to go outside to have that, outside the partnership. And that's what I recommend people do. Not have affairs, that's not what I'm talking about. But develop a group of friends that can talk to you about some of the things you want to talk about without anybody getting upset and angry, so that people can just have normal conversations with each other again. If that's important to you, you make sure that when you're choosing a partner, you get that. Okay. Number 3. This article says your commitment-phobe partner does not like to plan too far ahead. So this article goes on to say if your partner won't commit to making joint vacation plans months in advance, well, that may be perfectly normal if you all have not been dating long enough, or if you have heavy work schedules. If, however, they only give you a week, maybe, or I'll try, or worse yet, we'll see, when you issue an invitation to your annual, annual company picnic, this could be a problem. Now, I want to put something on the table, because I hear what she's saying, but I also want to say, don't make plans far in advance when you first are beginning to know somebody. That's ridiculous. Don't do that. It may or may not work out when you first meet somebody. So if you've got plans in 2 months to go to your high school reunion and you break up, and this whole thing is just, no, don't do that. That's fantasy too. Oh, let's make this a relationship. So let's plan some things out there that we can do together to make me believe this is a relationship when you don't even know this person yet. Don't make plans more than a few days ahead when you're first getting to know someone. And do that for a while. Okay? Because honestly, it's just not healthy for anybody far in advance. Now, what she's saying is if you are in relationship with someone, and this is actually supposed to be a relationship and they won't commit to things, that is something to look at. Okay. It could be something quite big, like celebrating your birthday, and they won't commit to that, and you're supposed to be in relationship with them. That's a problem, guys. It's a warning signal. If someone is a commitment phobe, having to make any future plans other than those that are strictly required, like work, court dates, doctor's appointments, and so on, can be a major fear for someone with this anxiety. Can they overcome it? Yes, but they have to want to. Guys, I think it's really important for you all to know that everybody can change their stripes, but they have to want to. They have to want to. They have to want to. And there's a lot of waking up that comes with this. What do I mean by that? I mean that people have issues. We put being right first, tasks first. We'll do all sorts of things without realizing something that comes with emotional maturity. Here it is. Love is a privilege. You honor love by loving. You honor love by not putting anything above that ever. You honor your partner and your partnership by knowing that and living according to that mission statement that love is a privilege. I think that's a really important thing to live by. And I think that when you are discussing partnership, you all need to put on the table what that means to each of you. Love is a privilege. What does that mean? Because that's what you're going to find in your relationship, and that those are the policies to live by for a good relationship. Don't you understand? So you have to have these deep talks. Someone who is a commitment phobe probably can't. So there we are. Okay. I think I've said everything. The article goes on a little bit, but I've said everything I need to say about that. All right, I found another article, and I thought this was a really good article. It's relationship experts say this toxic habit is one of the biggest predictions of divorce. Would you like to know what that is? Okay. I don't know who this person is, but it's Dr. Jen, Jenn, Mann, Mann, wrote the article. She says it is absolute poison to a relationship. Well, what it is, and I thought we ought to talk in more detail about this because as I remember, I mentioned this in passing when we first started the series, but let's talk about this particular thing. It's called stonewalling. Stonewalling. Stonewalling is when a person puts up a verbal and emotional wall and refuses to engage. There are a lot of different ways to stonewall, and this is the part that I want to get to today because I want to tell you how this is done. It's not just one partner not talking to each other. Sometimes that's good for a little while, knowing that we are absolutely going to talk about it because there's nothing else to do to heal this. We must talk about this, right? But sometimes we don't know what we feel. Again, I know that it takes me about 2 hours to find out what I feel. about something. It takes Michael about 12. It's a real important thing that we realize in our marriage. I'm fast. He's a little slower with that. He's much faster with other things than I am, let me tell you. But this is something that I happen to be faster at. So I know what I feel about something. I need for him, I need to be honoring of him and wait those hours until he figures that out, and then we talk. But stonewalling is when nobody gets around to talking about anything. That's stonewalling. So let's talk about different ways to stonewall. Number one, ignoring the other person even when being spoken to, and performing the silent treatment over a period of time. And having no intention of fixing this, by the way. That's what I just said. Number two, they abandon the usual ahas or hmms in a normal conversation. They won't, there's no feedback, right? Number three, monosyllabic mutterings, grunts, whatever. Yeah. But what? Okay. Changing the subject. This is called deflecting, and you'll just move off a subject. So I'll never forget, I had a client, dear client, who was terrified of emotion. Terrified. And a friend of mine who was really my surrogate mom, my mom had died years before, but now I was losing a very close friend of mine who had been my surrogate mom and a mentor in business to me. She was dear. And it was, she was not dying easily. And so her son had asked me to help them, right? And counsel them. And so I was doing so. And I told this client, I never answered the phone unless it's an emergency like this, by the way, during my sessions. But in this private session, I said, I want you to know if the phone rings, I must answer it if it's from this person because of this that was going on. And he immediately said to me, well, what do you think about this person that whose profile I pulled off for online dating? What do you think about her? I was so shocked. I mean, this was just such a huge sign of what we had been working on in many cases. That's deflection, by the way. And so it took me about 20 minutes to get him into a place where I could double back and say, do you realize you did this? And very honestly, he said, yeah, I was afraid of what you were going to make me feel. This was just a conversation with somebody, right? This was just a conversation. But he was that threatened that he couldn't have a conversation. Now, guys, you better find that out with people before you make this a strong commitment. So changing the subject is stonewalling, saying the same thing over and over again. People that don't have a good emotional vocabulary will just say the same thing over and over and over again. You just hear the same sentence over and over and over again. What? The next stonewalling tactic is disappearing for long periods of time. The next one, acting cold and impenetrable. And another one is avoiding eye contact. The problem with stonewalling is that it makes any sort of dialogue impossible. You see? And prevents couples from any ability to communicate and work through problems. And again, I will say the intention in stonewalling is not to work through problems. And if you are in partnership with someone or you are thinking about being, let me tell you, you need to decide which of those 4 things you're going to do that I mentioned. Are you going to sweep it under the rug? Are you going to go on like nothing happened? Are you going to divorce? Or are you going to work through problems no matter what? Certainly, that's the decision my husband and I have come to. We may not be ready to work through that problem when the problem first arises. Again, sometimes we need to get away. We need to figure out what's going on. We need to let that bubble up. What's happening here, right? We need to talk about how we've misread each other, or what has really happened, or how we heard that hurt us. But stonewalling has no intention of doing that. Okay. She goes on to say in this article, this was Jen Mann, that relationship researcher John Gottman, who is best known, by the way, for his ability to predict divorce with 94% accuracy, claims that stonewalling is the biggest predictor of divorce. Now, research shows that 85% of all stonewallers are men. The reason for this is that men have been found to be more physiologically reactive to emotional stimulation. In other words, they get more easily overwhelmed with emotion than women do. Well, think about the way their brains are wired, guys. I mean, that's really an important, I think, part of this. Women's brains are communicating, our hemispheres are communicating with each other all the time. That's why men, if they're unaware, say you're scattered. Because we're thinking of what we're going to cook for our next meal, for the following meal, what we're going to have for several days, what the kids are doing, what the animals are doing, what I'm having to do at work. We're thinking about a lot of things. Bim, 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 bim. It's going on all the time. But science has found that men's brains work from back to front. So it's more of the problem is whatever's in front of them that they need to fix and they need to do. Guys, we make a great team if we realize that about each other and have patience with that. So we're constantly dealing, women tend to, now I'm making generalities here, of course, but women tend to deal with emotional information more. We have the ability to deal with it more because of all of this cross current in our hemisphere, the hemispheres of our brain. Research also shows that during conflict, men's pulse rates and blood pressure are far more likely to rise than a woman's. And this is a physiological disadvantage. It leaves men vulnerable. They perceive themselves as more vulnerable. So what do? They create tactics to protect themselves, and one of them can be stonewalling if they're prone to that. If they saw their mothers and fathers do it, if they learned it from somewhere as a child. By the way, this is not to say that women don't stonewall in relationships. They surely do. So I am going to leave that little piece of information that Gottman puts out. Because let me tell you, I've seen just as many women doing this as men. Men and women don't even realize how toxic this protective mechanism is. They're protecting themselves like children, you understand. They learned to do it when they were a kid. But it's important for both of you to understand why you're doing it and what the effects are and what your other solutions to handle this are as well. You may have done this as a small child, and you may have done this, the mother and the father may have done this to each other and to you. You may actually have grown up thinking this is the way to handle a relationship. because your parents are the models, right? So here's some things to keep in mind if you want to change this behavior. Let's talk about that. Recognize when you're feeling overwhelmed during a discussion. That's the first thing. Don't just panic. Men and women, but men especially, because of what I said earlier. Panic. Realize that you're about to go into panic and don't. And realize you're overwhelmed during the discussion emotionally. And why isn't that all right? Look, I'm overwhelmed every time I go into a hardware store. My husband loves it. Loves it. I bought him a t-shirt at Christmas time saying my idea of romance is Home Depot or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but guys, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what screw to get. I can't, and God bless my husband. He realized that early on in our relationship when he'd give me a shopping list. I was delighted to go and try to find what he needed at a hardware store. Holy Moses, I'd always come home with the wrong thing. I never could do this. I always find one of the Home Depot men or women and saying, or the Lowe's men or women and say, help me. But I still am awful at that kind of thing. Recognize when you're overwhelmed. Recognize it. Then do something about it. Pull your heart rate down a little bit. Get calm. Lower your voice. Lower your energy level. Take a little time to figure out what is going on emotionally. It's fine to say to your partner, I hear you. There is a problem here. I recognize this. I hear that you feel that way, and I know that I feel this way. I get this, but solutions aren't here. So why don't we just separate a little while and figure out what's going on in us, and we'll come back and talk about it. You must come back and talk about it. You must. Otherwise, you have done irreparable damage. You must talk about it. Okay? Approach conflicts without abandoning each other. You know, give up the need to be right. There's a sign on my wall downstairs I just love, and that is, I am practicing being kind instead of right. Honey, being right isn't going to matter one bit when you are leaving this world. But love will. Because love goes on. We all need to find out how to love really well. It is a privilege. So she goes on to say, make a pact to talk through conflict and not abandon each other. Even if you have to take time outs during a heated discussion. I want to say, if you all have done the work on yourselves individually, that when you get back together, it shouldn't be as heated. If it is still as heated, there's more for you to know. So separate again, figure it out, come back together again. Sometimes these discussions do go on for 2 or 3 days. And I think it's very important to, in a kind way, remind each other that this isn't about your rule or your partner's rules. This is about policy of good relationships, isn't it? The policy of good relationships work right across the board. Again, why? Because all ascended truth confirms itself. This isn't just opinions. This isn't on that level of just opinions, you see? Much higher level. Now, I wonder, I have 14 minutes to go. One of the things I wanted to talk about was a sense of entitlement. This is sometimes a part of narcissism, and I think it is damaging to relationships, so I want to put it on the table relative to that. A definition of a sense of entitlement is an unrealistic, unmerited, or inappropriate expectation of favorable living conditions or favorable treatment at the hands of others. You want me to repeat that? Definition: an unrealistic, unmerited, or inappropriate expectation of favorable living conditions and favorable treatment at the hands of others. This is from an article called The Sense of Entitlement, and I don't know who wrote it. I'm so embarrassed about that. I usually write those things down. For some reason, I didn't write this down. But this is certainly my opinion taken from this article, so you can look for this article yourself. Guys, the bottom line is our needs are just our needs. They're not more important than anybody else's. We can never abandon ourselves, and we do a lot of times, because the opposite of that is just giving everything away and having nothing and never getting any of our needs met. And that often comes from childhood, when it was really rough, and we can just give up. We can have such a sense of shame, and for what? Nothing, by the way. Kids are just kids, that we have given ourselves up a long time ago. Sometimes, in our giving ourselves up, we wear that overtly. Sometimes, we hide it, and we'll put on a sense of entitlement. I think that narcissism is more than selfishness. We're all selfish. It's part of the human condition. Narcissism occurs when we cross that pathological line, and we need to shore ourselves up in every way possible. Narcissists have a really hard time with people that disagree with them. Guys, everybody has this, to more or less degrees. But we have to realize that a very loving thing to do, to live in the world, is to create the win-win solutions of you and I agree to agree or agree to disagree, and it's just fine. What does entitlement look like? This is part of this article. Goes on to say that a mother feeds herself while letting her children go hungry. A spouse frequently spends money from the joint account on luxury items. A teenager defiantly uses drugs and expects his parents to bail him out when he gets caught. A woman shows up at a function or party that she has not been invited to. A middle-aged man makes no attempt to save for his retirement, assuming his family will pay for everything. An irate customer demands products and services that they have not paid for. An angry parent wants a school to make an impractical concession or arrangement for their child. I think that we must all realize that we're in a community. We're in a community. If you don't like your community, then start thinking differently, because communities are attracted by what we think and how we feel. Again, we are more comfortable with people that have the same agendas we do. Sometimes that's negative. This article goes on to say, don't give in to unrealistic demands just to keep the peace. Again, that's a great, easy thing to say. You have to have a strong sense of self to do it. You have to know who you are. You have to know what you deserve and what you don't deserve, and what is inappropriate and what is not inappropriate. And you won't be able to do it at all if you carry shame. The article goes on to say, don't expect a personality disordered person to reciprocate favorable treatment you show them. I think that's true. There are people that just simply can't do what you're asking them to do. I think I mentioned before a man that is high conflict that I know, and he's very good with a quick response to tell you you're wrong when you try to tell him what you're seeing he does. And he can't. He simply cannot be the husband that this other woman wants. She wants someone to speak kindly to her. He's not kind. He's not capable of doing that. He is so shame-filled, doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to get there, wants to do it himself, says, I'll work on myself. How do you think that's going? That it just doesn't work. This article says, don't try to use logic to argue your way out of it. It will be interpreted as invalidating their feelings and results in a circular conversation. I agree. Don't stay in any situation or room where your basic needs, such as food, sleep, shelter, medical attention, supportive relationships, and safety from violence, is threatened or withheld. I believe that. Don't feel rushed into making or denying comments or decisions. It's okay to say, let me think about that. I'll have to think about that. I do believe that we should say, okay, let me get back to you on that. Don't fall into black and white thinking. People with a sense of entitlement do have legitimate needs and concerns. They're human beings too. And so I will also add one of my own, which is, do not normalize or generalize this behavior. In other words, don't normalize and say, well, everybody treats people this way. Don't generalize, all men are like that. All women are like that. Those are generalizations and normalizations, and neither will serve you. This article goes on to say, here are some things to do if you are with someone with a sense of entitlement, and certainly if you recognize your own. Recognize the characteristics, understand where it comes from, will help you to understand the kind of background they came from. Accept that you're not going to be able to meet all the needs of them. That is especially true in the case of people with personality disorders. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the good you do, even if they don't see it. Okay? You realize what you're doing. You have thought of them when you went to the grocery store. You have thought of them and what they would like here and there. You have done something in the house that you think that they will see. They may never see it, but you need to know that you've done it. You see? And I point it out from time to time, by the way. When you're in a situation like this, I think it's so important to take care of yourself, take care of your own needs, have that community somewhere else that you're talking about, work with a therapist, however you want to do it, or with your church. It's really important to take care of yourself. And the other thing is talk to others before you, if you are confused, talk to others before you say a yes or a no. Guys, I've enjoyed working with you. We only have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to stop there. I don't know what we're going to be talking about next week. Probably shame. I think that's such a important part of relationships. I think that might be a good place for us to go next. And I am real proud of all of you all for listening in, and for thank you, Hope. Thank you. Hello, darling. And for being part of this community, part of the show. Thank you, Fabiola. Oh, good. Thank you. She said, taking notes. That's always lovely. Guys, let's do a quick prayer. Get all this given up in us to our highest selves. How about that? Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in this world, we are open now to having you heal us. We give what we can of our issues that the show has brought up to our highest selves, and we ask for transformation here, that we may know what love is and what a privilege it is, and that we are on a wonderful and deep and lasting path to always find out more. If love is indeed God, and if God is all we are, the more we know, the more we love. We thank you so much, dear God, for all of this. We say this prayer in your name and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, in the name of every one of these dear people that are listening in today. We appreciate it so much, and we say thank you. Thank you, dear God, for all of it and for the privilege of love. We say this now in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, and in the name of all. And so it is. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for getting the word around about these programs. It means a lot. Our community is growing because you guys are on the front line and you get out there and you tell everybody. So thank you so much for doing so. We really appreciate it.
90 seconds.
90 seconds. Okay, guys. Have a wonderful week. All right? See you next week. Bye-bye.